Archangel Chronicles 3, Chapter 6, The Prophet's Word. Copyright 2026 by Raymond Collotti. All rights reserved.
The torch is burned in Machaerus, the wine ran dark and red. The drums below beneath the stone like whisperings of the dead. And Salome came through silk and flame with silver at her feet, while Herod watched with drunken eyes and heard his own heartbeat.
She turned beneath the torchlight, she spun through golden fire, and every veil that fell away fed Antipas' desire.
Then drunk with wine and foolish pride before his gathered throne,
ask anything and it is yours, even half of all I own. Oh, the voice may fall and the night grow long. The sword may silence the singer, but it cannot silence the song. For beyond the walls of Machaerus, with the coming of the dawn, the voice may fall in darkness,
but the word goes on.
Salome turned him to her mother, and Herodias.
The hall of Machaerus burned with torchlight and the glow of hammered bronze braziers. Shadows climbed the painted walls like living things. The air was thick with roasted meats, crushed figs, myrrh, sweat, and the dark wine as dark as blood. Roman officers reclined beside Idumean nobles and Galilean courtiers, and their laughter swollen with drunk. Musicians, hidden behind lattice screens, plucked at strings and beat slow rhythms upon the skin drums that sounded like the pulse of some immense animal. At the high table sat Herod Antipas, heavy-eyed already from the feast. His fingers glittered with rings as he raised cup after cup. Beside him moved Herodias like a patient serpent in royal linen, pouring wine with her own hands, smiling softly whenever Antipas drank. Again and again she filled his cup before it emptied. The wine had been steeped with poppy and eastern resins. A pleasant fog now floated through the tetrarch's thoughts, warming his blood, loosening restraint, making every touch brighter, every sound richer. Below the dais, among the guests, stood the Nabatean prince Obadias, young, bronze-skinned, proud as a desert falcon. He wore white robes branded in gold thread, with a curved dagger at his waist and amber beads at his throat. His dark eyes searched constantly for one person alone, Salome. Herodias knew this. She drifted behind the prince while the servants cleared the center of the hall. Her hands settled lightly upon his shoulders with intimate possession. Long jeweled fingers moved slowly over the fabric at his collar. Leaning near enough for her lips, almost to brush his neck, she whispered something only he could hear. Obadias stiffened. Across the chamber, concealed behind a veil of blue silk, Salome saw. For a single instant, her composure faltered, and her mother's eyes found hers through the crowd. The message was unmistakable: dance or he dies. The drums began. A hush rolled through the banquet hall. Salome entered. At first she seemed scarcely human, a vision summoned out of incense and moonlight. Layers of translucent veils shimmered around her in pale blue, silver, and deep crimson. Gold chains circled her ankles and wrists, chiming softly as she moved. Her dark hair had been braided with tiny coins and pearls that flashed in the firelight. She stood motionless for several heartbeats. Then one bare foot slid forward. The musicians answered. The dance began slowly, almost reverently. A turn of the wrists, a lowering of the head, the lifting of her arms like the unfurling wings of a desert bird. Every movement drew the eye towards another movement, each gesture promising more than it revealed. Those watching in the great hall were transfixed and leaned in closer to follow every movement. Salome moved through the torchlight with impossible control, fluid as poured oil, then suddenly sharp as a striking blade. She spun between the tables, veils trailing behind her like colored smoke. She bent backward until her hair brushed the mosaic floor, then rose again in one smooth motion that drew gasps from the guests. Antipas stared at her as though bewitched. The drums quickened, and now the dance changed, all innocence vanishing from it. The Nabatean rhythms deepened into something primal and ancient. Salome's feet beat against the stones with startling precision. Her hips swayed in perfect time to the drums, while her upper body remained poised and regal, the contrast making the movement all the more mesmerizing. She leapt suddenly atop a low banquet platform, spun around its narrow edge, then descended like a flame curling downward. Antipas laughed aloud in amazement, wine spilling from his cup. All the while, Herodias remained beside Obadias, one hand still resting possessively upon the young prince's shoulder. Sometimes she glanced towards Salome with the faintest smile. Salome danced harder and faster still, as much in desperation as in show. Now she whirled through the hall in widening circles, veils flying outward until she seemed wrapped inside a storm of silk and gold. The musicians drove outward into frenzy. Flutes shrieked, drums thundered like racing hearts. The guests no longer spoke. They watched in silence, enthralled. Antipas had forgotten his dignity entirely. He leaned forward upon the couch, flushed and breathing heavily, his eyes unable to leave her. Salome spun once, twice, a third time, and the outer veil flew free into the air like a banner. A cry rose from the hall. Then another veil vanished. Then another, not discarded crudely, but transformed through movement, each seeming to dissolve into the whirl of color and torchlight until no one could tell where the silk ended and motion began. At last she became only a living vortex of pale limbs, black hair, jewels, and spinning crimson cloth. The drums reached their climax, and Salome turned with impossible speed. Then she suddenly disappeared into the thin air with a flash. The hall erupted in astonishment. For one heartbeat, there was nothing at the center of the chamber but drifting veils falling softly through torchlight. Then a startled murmur swept the guests. Salome stood beside Antipas. No one had seen her cross the room. One instant she had been whirling at the center of the feast, and the next she knelt at the tetrarch's side, like an apparition summoned from desire itself. Antipas seized her hands. His face glistened with sweat and wine. Around him the hall roared with applause and drunken cries, but he heard only the pounding of his own blood. "Ask me whatever you wish," he declared thickly, his voice carrying across the chamber. "By my oath before all gathered here, I shall give it to you, even unto half my kingdom." A silence followed. Salome's breathing trembled. For the first time that night, she looked frightened. Slowly she turned toward her mother. Herodias opened her arms. Salome crossed the hall through the scattered veils and fallen goblets and bent low beside her. Herodias drew her daughter close, lips brushing her ear. The older woman's face never changed. Only her eyes gleamed. "The head," she whispered, "of the Baptist." Far above, the feast still raged. The drums had not ceased. Their muffled pounding filtered downward through stone vaults and narrow shafts like the heartbeat of some monstrous creature feeding in the dark. Laughter echoed faintly through the fortress of Machaerus, mingling with the hiss of torches and the groan of old iron gates. But in the lower passages, all warmth and beauty vanished. There the air smelled of wet stone, rust, mold, and old suffering. Brigomarus stood half concealed within the shadows of a descending stair, his broad hand clenched so tightly upon the wall that bloodless knuckles gleamed white in the torchlight. His face, weathered by years and scarred by war, seemed carved from granite itself, yet horror now lived openly in his eyes. He had seen everything, the dance, the oath, the whisper, and now the consequence. At the far end of the corridor, the guards drew aside at the approach of a tall figure clothed in black scaled leather. The man moved with terrible calm. His beard was braided with bronze rings in the Eastern fashion, and his heavy curved sword hung across his back in a lacquered sheath dark as oil. Here was the Babylonian, Antipas's executioner. Long ago, in the past, Brigomarus had heard the whispers of him among the soldiers for years. Men said he had served princes east of the Euphrates before entering the service of Herod Antipas's father, and now him. Others claimed he had once been a temple killer in the courts of strange gods. Whatever the truth, death walked easily beside him. 4 guards accompanied him now. No warrant was spoken, and none was needed. Brigomarus felt the blood drained from his face. "No," he whispered. The executioner descended deeper into the fortress, towards the Baptist. For one instant, Brigomarus nearly froze where he stood, caught between terror and certainty. Yet something fiercer than fear arose within him then. 30 years earlier, he had ridden beneath Herod's eagle standard with spear and sword. 30 years earlier, he had helped bring death to innocents in Bethlehem. Never again. He slipped into the shadows and followed. The corridors narrowed as they descended beneath the palace foundations into older chambers carved directly from the mountain itself. Water dripped steadily from unseen cracks. Rats skittered through the piles of straw. The torches burned low here, their smoke trapped beneath the stone ceilings. Ahead, the executioner halted before a heavy cedar door, banded with iron. John's cell. One guard unlocked it. The Babylonian removed the great curved sword from his back, the blade whispering from its sheath. Brigomarus moved. With a roar that seemed too large for the corridor itself, he burst from the darkness and crashed into the rearmost guards before they could turn. One man struck the wall hard enough to crack stone. Brigomarus seized another by the throat and drove him backward into the iron bars with bone-breaking force. The corridor exploded into chaos. A torch fell. Shadows leapt wildly. The Babylonians spun instantly, faster than any man his size and age should move. But Brigomarus was already upon the others. His fist smashed into a jaw. Teeth flew across stones. Another guard lunged with a spear, only for Brigomarus to wrench it aside and drive the butt into the man's ribs. For one furious moment, the old Gallic warrior had become young again, and the red death of battle returned to him. A guard drew a dagger. Brigomarus caught his wrist and broke it with a savage twist. The man screamed. Then something crashed against Brigomarus from behind. Another guard, then another. The corridor became a crush of bodies. Iron curses and blood. Brigomarus hurled one man aside and reached toward the executioner, but the Babylonian moved like a striking serpent. The pommel of the curved sword smashed into Brigomarus's temple. Light burst behind his eyes. He staggered. A second blow crashed into the back of his skull, and the world reeled violently. He dropped to one knee, still struggling to rise, still trying to reach the cell. The door stood open now. Inside, John the Baptist had risen calmly from the stone where he had been seated. He did not resist. Torchlight flickered across the gaunt face and wild beard. Though chained for many days within darkness, there remained something unbroken in him, something vast and still as the desert sky. His eyes found Brigomarus. There was no fear, no anger, only sorrow and peace. "Master," Brigomarus gasped through blood. John stepped forward as the guards seized him. "It is not for me you must grieve," the Baptist said softly. The Babylonian frowned impatiently. John ignored him. Instead, he laid one chained hand briefly upon Brigomarus's bowed head. The old warrior trembled. "Blessed are you, Brigomarus," John whispered, "for the Lord has seen your heart." Tears mixed with blood upon Brigomarus's face. "Let me fight," he choked. "I can still—" "No." John's voice was gentle now. "The cup is already poured." The guards dragged him away. Brigomarus tried once more to rise. A boot slammed into his ribs, and another blow struck his face. Darkness surged inward at the edges of his sight. Dimly he felt iron chains wrapped around his wrists. He was hauled across the floor and thrown brutally into the Baptist's empty cell. The door crashed shut behind him with a sound of final judgment. He clawed weakly toward the bars. Outside, the Babylonian and his men disappeared further down the corridor, taking John with them into chambers hidden deeper within the fortress. Then a long and terrible silence. Far above, the feast still thundered. Then it came, a dull, metallic sound, the scrape of chains, a muffled command, and at last, the heavy descending blow of the great curved sword. Brigomarus shut his eyes. A terrible cry rose in his soul, though no sound escaped his lips. He sagged against the cold stones as darkness closed around him like deep water, and before unconsciousness claimed him entirely, he cursed the darkness. The feast had not recovered its voice. The music had ceased, and the drums were silent. Herod Antipas reclined upon his couch as though suddenly aged many years. The wine cup hung forgotten in his hand. Around him the torches still burned, servants still moved, guests still breathed, yet all seemed distant, muffled, unreal. His oath echoed endlessly in his mind. "Whatever you ask." He had spoken the words before princes, officers, merchants, nobles, and priests, and now they had become a sentence. The revelry that had followed Salome's dance swirled around him like a storm viewed from behind glass. Men laughed too loudly, and others whispered nervously. Some pretended not to understand what had been requested. Antipas heard none of it. He saw only the face of the Baptist, the wild prophet by the Jordan, the man who had looked at him in the eye without fear, the man who had spoken truth when every other voice offered flattery. A cold knot tightened within his chest. Then the great doors at the far end of the hall opened. At once every conversation died, and silence spread outward like a ripple across still water. All eyes turned as the Babylonian entered. He walked slowly between the banquet tables, 4 guards accompanying him. In his hands he carried a broad silver platter, heaped high with white chrysanthemums. The blossoms formed a mound so large that whatever lay beneath could not be seen, yet everyone understood. A dark stain has begun to spread among the flowers. Drops of crimson slipped from the edge of the platter and fell upon the polished marble floor behind him, one, then another, and another. The sound of his sandals echoed through the vast hall. No one moved or spoke. The executioner approached Salome. She stood beside her couch, pale as ivory. The triumph expected by her mother never came. Instead, she trembled visibly. The Babylonian halted before her and slowly lowered the platter. The scent of blood rose through the perfume of the flowers. Salome stared, and for a moment she seemed unable to breathe. Then her knees gave away, and she collapsed to the floor. A cry escaped her lips, not a cry of victory, but of horror. Tears burst forth uncontrollably. She covered her face with both hands and shook with sobs. The hall watched in stunned silence. The Babylonian frowned, clearly uncertain about what to do. Slowly he gestured toward the platter. Salome recoiled from it as though from a serpent. "No," she whispered. Then, unable even to look at it, she pointed across the hall towards her mother. The executioner followed the direction of her hand. Understanding dawned. Without a word, he lifted the platter again and crossed the chamber. Herodias remained seated, perfectly composed, perfectly still, with only the faintest suggestion of satisfaction touching the corners of her mouth. The Babylonian placed the platter upon a nearby table and stepped back. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then Herodias arose. The rustle of her robes seemed unnaturally loud. The entire hall watched. Slowly, deliberately, she reached towards the chrysanthemums. One bloom fell aside, then another and another. White petals drifted onto the table like snow. A murmur passed through the guests as the prophet's severed head emerged from beneath the flowers. The face was still, the eyes closed, the lips slightly parted. Yet even in death, there remained something strangely unconquered about him, something at peace. Herodias gazed upon it and smiled. A small smile, cold as winter. The smile of a woman who believed an enemy had finally been silenced. Some guests turned away. Others stared in fascination. A few covered their mouths. Herodias touched the tangled hair and lifted the head slightly for all to see. "Behold," she said softly. Her voice carried through the hall. "The prophet." No triumph answered her, only silence. And the silence unsettled even those who hated John, for the dead man seemed somehow greater than he had been in life. The silence deepened. Herodias' smile slowly faded. The hall had not reacted as she had hoped. No celebration came, no laughter or applause, only revulsion and dread. Somewhere among the guests, a woman began to weep. Another man blessed himself in the old Judean fashion against an evil deed. A priest lowered his eyes. Salome screamed and ran out of the hall, her shrieks echoing through the silent chamber. This broke the spell. Voices erupted, questions, arguments, shouts. Some demanded wine, others demanded to leave. Several nobles rose from their couches in outrage. Roman officers exchanged uneasy glances. Servants fled in confusion. The banquet dissolved into chaos. Within moments, the hall had become a storm of noise and movement, yet at the center of it all sat Herod Antipas, motionless and head bowed, an untouched cup resting beside him. Around him the feast collapsed into disorder. Before him lay the consequence of his weakness, and though the prophet's voice had been silenced, Antipas heard it now more clearly than ever. "It is not lawful." The words echoed through his soul like a judgment. The tetrarch understood that John the Baptist had not been defeated. He had become a martyr, while Antipas, minor king though he was, had become a prisoner of his own guilt. Down in the cell there was darkness, not the gentle darkness of night beneath the stars, nor the peaceful darkness Brigomarus had known in the wilderness beside John's fires. This was a darkness of stone and iron, a darkness that smelled of mold, blood, and despair. For a long time he drifted within it, neither waking nor sleeping. Fragments of memory came and went. The dance, the oath, the Babylonian, John's hand resting upon his head. "Blessed are you, Brigomarus." Then the sword and the terrible descending blow. A groan escaped his lips, and pain answered immediately. His head throbbed, his ribs felt broken, every muscle ached. Slowly, consciousness returned. Brigomarus opened his eyes. Nothing, only blackness. For a moment panic surged through him. Had he gone blind? Then he saw it. Far beyond the bars, somewhere down the corridor, a dying torch cast the faintest thread of orange light. He was still alive. The realization brought no comfort. A terrible weight settled upon him. John was dead. The words struck him anew with all the force of a hammer. Dead. The prophet of the Jordan, the voice crying in the wilderness, the man who had shown him mercy when he deserved none. Gone. Brigomarus rolled onto his side and buried his face against the cold stone floor. For many years he had believed himself beyond tears. Soldiers learned such things early. The world beat them out of a man. Yet now tears came freely. He wept in the darkness for John, for the children of Bethlehem, for the wasted years of his own life, for every wound he had ever given and every wound he had received. The fortress remained silent. Above him, the feast had ended. The drunken laughter was gone, only the occasional murmur of distant guards drifting through the stone. At length, his tears ceased. Exhaustion settled over him. He lay motionless, staring into the darkness. Then something stirred in memory, not a sound or a vision, but a feeling, the memory of John's hand upon his head. "The Lord has seen your heart." Brigomarus tensed. "What heart?" he whispered bitterly. His voice echoed softly within the cell. "What heart, master?" The darkness offered no answer. He laughed once, a harsh, broken sound. "I failed you." Silence. "I could not save you." Silence. His fists tightened. "I could not save anyone." The old guilt rose within him. The faces of Bethlehem emerged from the shadows of memory. Mothers screaming, children crying, smoke, blood, the sound of hooves. For 30 years he had carried those ghosts, 30 years trying to outrun them. Yet they remained, always waiting, always watching. He lowered his head. I am tired. The words barely escaped him. Tired of carrying it. The silence seemed endless. Then another memory surfaced, not from Bethlehem or Machaerus, but from a dawn years ago in the wilderness. John standing beside the Jordan, the river shining gold beneath the rising sun. People gathered along the banks, and John's voice carrying over the water, Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Repent, not despair, not surrender. Repent, return, begin again. Brigomarus slowly opened his eyes. The darkness around him remained unchanged, yet something within him had shifted. John had never spoken of the past as a prison, but as something that could be surrendered, something God could heal. Brigomarus sat up slowly, winced as pain shot through his ribs. The chains rattled softly. For the first time since awakening, he looked around the cell. This had been John's prison. John had prayed here, waited here, and suffered here. And somehow he found peace here. Brigomarus rested his head against the wall. The stone still had a trace of warmth, or perhaps he only imagined it. His eyes closed. A prayer formed upon his lips, awkward and uncertain. The prayer of a soldier rather than a holy man. Lord, he stopped. The word felt strange, yet he tried again. Lord, his voice trembled. If your servant is gone, he swallowed hard. Then show me what remains. Nothing happened. No vision appeared. No angel descended. No voice answered from heaven. Only silence, but it was no longer an empty silence. It felt somehow alive, waiting. Beyond the narrow slit of the fortress window, invisible in the eastern sky, dawn was beginning to gather. Brigomarus did not know it. He could not see the first pale light touching the desert. He could not see the Jordan Valley far below the mountains. He could not see Galilee awakening beneath the coming sun. But somewhere beyond the darkness of Machaerus, another man was walking the roads of Israel, a carpenter from Nazareth. And even as the voice in the wilderness fell silent, the word it had proclaimed was beginning to speak. Brigomarus bowed his head. The chains remained. The prison remained. The grief remained. Yet for the first time since the sword had fallen, despair loosened its grip upon him, and in the darkness beneath the fortress of Machaerus, he waited for the dawn. The darkness had begun to thin. A faint light now moved through the corridor beyond Brigomarus' cell. At first he thought he was dreaming, but glow wavered against the stone. Then came the soft scrape of footsteps. Brigomarus sat up instantly. The chains rattled and his bruised body protested. The light grew nearer. A hooded figure appeared beyond the bars, and another followed, then a third. One of them raised a finger to their lips. Silence. The voice was a whisper, and a woman's voice. Brigomarus stared. The figure lowered her hood. Who are you? Asked Brigomarus. Shoshona, came the answer. I was a follower. The old Gallic warrior blinked in disbelief. The servant woman knelt beside the lock. We have little time. What are you doing here? Getting you out. Brigomarus frowned. The guards have become unexpectedly cooperative, she said. A faint smile touching her lips. One of the hooded men beside her produced a key, and the lock clicked softly. The iron door creaked open. For a moment, Brigomarus simply stared. He had expected death, perhaps years in prison. Freedom seemed impossible. Shoshona reached through the doorway and took his arm. "You must come." The urgency in her voice ended all questions. Brigomarus rose painfully to his feet. Only then did he notice the others more clearly. 3 men with dusty cloaks and travel-stained faces, eyes red from grief. John's disciples. One of them he recognized immediately, Andrew. The fisherman looked older than when Brigomarus had last seen him. He was aged by sorrow. Andrew clasped his forearm. "Come." Brigomarus nodded. Together they slipped into the corridor. The fortress remained strangely quiet. Many guards were absent. Others looked away as the group passed, and one even pretended not to see them. Brigomarus raised an eyebrow. Shoshona caught the look. "Silver," she said. "What?" said Brigomarus. "Silver persuades men that blindness is a virtue." For the first time since John's death, a faint shadow of a smile touched Brigomarus's face. They moved deeper into the fortress, not upward toward the palace, but downward, into the chambers even older than prison itself. The passages became narrow and the air colder. Finally, they reached a small vaulted room hidden beneath the mountain. There they stopped. Several oil lamps burned, their light falling upon a stone table. Brigomarus froze. For a long time nobody spoke. John lay before them. The body had been washed, the blood cleaned away, a linen shroud covering him from shoulder to feet. At the head of the bier rested another bundle of white cloth. Andrew approached it reverently. With trembling hands he unfolded the fabric. The Baptist's face appeared, peaceful, still, at rest. The sight struck Brigomarus harder than the execution itself. The struggle was gone now. The suffering ended. John looked as though he merely slept. The old warrior slowly sank to one knee. No words came. None seemed sufficient. Around him the others bowed their heads, and the room fell silent. At last Shoshona spoke. "Salome sent me." Several of the disciples looked up in surprise. Brigomarus turned toward her. "Salome?" Shoshona nodded. She could not bear what happened. The servant woman's eyes lowered. She wept all night. Brigomarus said nothing. The moment the feast ended, she ordered me to find John's followers. Why? Because she wished this done. Shoshona gestured toward the body. A proper burial. The old soldier studied her carefully. And Herodias? A bitter expression crossed Shoshona's face. Herodias knows nothing. Antipas? He knows less. One of the disciples bowed his head and whispered a prayer. Shoshona hesitated. There is more. Brigomarus looked at her. Salome has fled. The words echoed softly through the chamber. Gone? Before dawn, Shoshona nodded. She took only a few possessions. Where? I do not know. For a moment sadness flickered across the servant's face. Perhaps she does not know herself. The group stood in silence. At last Andrew stepped forward. We must leave. Everyone nodded. Time was running short. Carefully they wrapped the Baptist's head once more and reunited it with the body. Then they lifted the bier. The weight passed from shoulder to shoulder as they began the slow journey upward. No songs were sung, no words spoken, only prayers whispered beneath their breath. The hidden passages led them through forgotten portions of the fortress. Twice they paused while guards passed nearby. No challenge came. Silver had indeed purchased remarkable blindness. At last they emerged beyond the outer walls. The eastern horizon glowed pale silver. Dawn. The desert stretched before them, silent, endless, and free. They journeyed for several hours through rocky valleys and lonely wadis. At last, they came to a small tomb cut into a hillside. It belonged to a sympathizer of John's movement, a quiet place hidden from the world. There they laid him to rest. The body was wrapped anew. Perfume oils were poured and prayers offered. Andrew spoke through tears. Others followed. Finally, the stone was rolled into place, the sound echoing across the barren hills. A chapter of the world had ended, and for a long while nobody moved. The sun climbed steadily above the eastern mountains. Golden light spread across the wilderness. Brigomarus stood apart from the others. His eyes remained fixed upon the sealed tomb. At last Shoshana approached him. "What will you do now?" The old warrior looked towards the distant north, toward Galilee and the lands beyond the Jordan, towards the road John had spoken of so often. "I will find him." Shoshana already knew whom he meant. The carpenter. Brigomarus nodded. "The one John sent us to." The wind stirred his gray hair. "The Baptist's work is finished." His voice grew quiet. "But the one he spoke of still walks among men." For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Andrew stepped beside him. "So do we." Brigomarus looked at the fisherman. The grief and uncertainty remained, yet beneath it something else had begun to grow. A sense of purpose, the same purpose John had seen when he blessed him in the prison. The old Gallic warrior turned from the tomb. The road awaited. Far away, in the towns and villages of Galilee, a carpenter from Nazareth was gathering disciples, and Brigomarus, once soldier, once executioner, once servant of kings, began walking towards his destiny.
The torch is burned in Machaerus, the wine ran dark and red. The drums below beneath the stone like whispers of the dead. And Salome came to silken flame with silver at her feet, while Herod watched with drunken eyes and heard his own heart beat.
She turned beneath the torchlight, she spun through golden fire, and every veil that fell away fed Antipas' desire.
Then drunk with wine and foolish pie before his gathered throne,
Ask anything and it is yours, even half of all I own. Oh, the voice may fall and the night grow long. The sword may silence the singer, but it cannot silence the song. For beyond the walls of Machaerus, with the coming of the dawn, the voice may fall in darkness,
but the word goes on.
Salome turned him to her mother, and Herodias whispered low. The head of John the Baptist, that is what you asking for.
Salome turned unto her mother, and Herodias whispered low.
The head of John the Baptist, that is what you asking for.
And down beneath the revelry, where neither moon nor star could touch the ancient prison stones that came from near and far,
The Babylonian drew his blade, but Brigomarus cried no. The old red warrior charged the guards and struck them blow for blow.
but iron fell upon his head and blood ran down his face, while John stepped calmly from his cell with neither fear nor hate.
Let me fight, cried
I
Brigomarus.
swear I'll set you free.
John laid a chain hand on his head.
Do not weep in me.
The Lord has looked upon your heart, the cup is poured this night.
And they dragged the prophet down the hall and vanished from the light.
There came this great Brigomarus.
Brigomarus,
I swear I'll set you free. John laid a chain hand on his head.
do not weep for me. The Lord has looked upon your heart. The cup is poured this night.
Then they dragged the prophet down the hall and vanished from the light.
There came the scrape of iron, a whispered word, and then the heavy falling out, the sword that would not rise again. And Brigomarus cursed the darkness as he sank against the stone.
While far above the drunken king sat trembling on his throne.
Oh, the voice may fall and the night grow long. The sword may silence the singer, but it cannot silence the song. For beyond the walls of Machaerus, with the coming of the dawn, the voice may fall in darkness, but the word goes on.
They brought the silver platter through all as still as death.
White flowers hid the prophet,
And the blood beneath the reeds.
Salome saw and fell away, her tears upon the floor.
While Herodias raised the Baptist head and smiled at last no more.
For no man laughed,
No God that prayed,
no voice proclaimed,
the
the
one
prophet seemed.
more terrible.
Now that the deed was done, and Antipas heard through all the hall the words he could not flee.
It is not lawful, still they burn within his memory.
Down in the dark, Brigomarus wept for Bethlehem long ago. For every child, for every soul, for every wound and woe.
I could not save you,
Master,
I could not make things right.
and through his grief King John though cried
Like morning through the night.
repent, not despair, return, begin again. The past need not imprison you, no darkness had the end. Before the dawn came, Shoshana,
With Andrew out of sight,
with silver bought the guards blind eyes,
and opened up the night. They found the body of a Baptist,
and bore him from that place.
and in a lonely desert tomb they laid him down in grace.
The stone road shut behind him, the morning's dawn of old. Gold spilled across the wilderness and touched the hills and rose. Then Shoshana asked Brigomarus, what road is yours to take? He looked toward distant Galilee when morning lay awake. Oh, the voice has fallen,
But the night he was gone,
sure to silence the singer,
but it could not silence the song.
but beyond the walls of Machaerus
In the glory of the dawn,
the Baptist road is ended, but the work goes on.
Music for Chapter 6. On Goes the Prophet's Word, words by Raymond Collodi, music and voices by Marika A.I. Mara's Death, conceived by Raymond Collodi, music and voices by Marika A.I. The following from Epidemic Sound: Celestial Breath by Palace on Wheels, Struggle in the Jungle by Kikora, Villain versus Young Hero by Grant Newman, Shri Ram Suti by Siddharth Prashar, Unsettling Mystery by Anna Dage, Dragon King by Joe Wandrini, Chant of the Moors by Flo, Crypta by Joe Wandrini, Ethos by Johannes Borloff, Theme of Darkness by Frederick Ekstrom, Kyrie eleison by Silver Maple. And from Vital, Stomp. Archangel Chronicles 3, Chapter 6. Copyright 2026 by Raymond Collodi, all rights reserved.